Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Alliance of Independent Authors Advanced Self-Publishing Salon with me, Joanna Penn, and Orna Ross. Hi, Orna.
Hi, Joanna, which almost didn't happen.
We had some technical issues, but this is an important part of our indie author life. Technical issues just need to be resolved. They never go away. I'm pretty sure that the early authors had to deal with typewriter ribbons or other issues, stamps, or how long things took to get places.
Breaking quills.
Breaking quills, yeah, and all the above, writing by candlelight. So yes, here we are anyway, and lots going on this week. So I think I'm starting this week.
Yes, I wanted you to start this week because you have been doing your annual kind of clean out. Now, I know you have a few things that you do every year, and I know that they are hotly awaited in the indie author community. People are always dying to hear what you're up to, and you're very generous in sharing all your stuff. So tell us what you found in the last year.
Yeah, so basically I left my job the second week of September 2011. So every year on the anniversary, I post a lessons learned in the last year. So this is 6 years of being a full-time author entrepreneur. And I think that what I've also done, and I suggest everyone do this, or in fact, anyone at any point. So thecreativepenn.com/timeline, what I've actually done now is collected kind of the highlights of my indie author career from 2006 when I first started writing up, and and then all the years I've posted all this type of thing, and this year a few things. So remember, if you're listening to this and you're like, what is she talking about, this is year 6 of full-time author entrepreneur, and 11 years writing now, writing like seriously writing. So it's quite different depending on where you are in the journey. So the first thing I put is more co-writing means more books and helps more people. So I've been doing a lot of co-writing in the last year. I did start doing this in 2015 with Jay Thorne with Risen Gods, but this year I've done another novel with Jay, Lindsay and Zach in New Orleans. I've also been co-writing Sweet Romance with my mum, and I will be announcing the name over Christmas or New Year. I know, at some point once we have 3 books out. And also I'm now co-writing with a medical doctor a book called The Healthy Writer, which we're going to come back to in a bit. So co-writing is really helping me expand my number of books, help more people, and also help me to travel for tax deductible reasons, which is always good. The other thing that's changed, and of course you've been harping on about this for years, but this year I've really embraced print again after doing POD with CreateSpace, but really not that big into print. In the last year I've done workbooks, I've done large print, and I've done going into Ingram Spark with focusing on bookstores and libraries, and really just using Ingram, and also ordering bulk buys from Ingram. So that's a lot cheaper because you get you can print them. So speaking in Australia, I printed the books in Australia at cost. So that was fantastic. So definitely looking at print, and gonna do more in print. I just interviewed Joseph Alexander for my podcast, and I know you've interviewed him for the Alliance stuff. And Joseph, makes multi 6 figures a year, mainly from print books. So indies are doing well with print, and I'm like, yeah, I want a piece of that. So print this year has been bigger. Focus on what really matters. Don't create another job and say no more. I actually have been writing this every year and still failing miserably, but I keep aiming to say no more. And this, I think, for all of us is a battle between ego, by going, oh goodness, somebody wants me to speak, or someone wants me to go on this thing, or someone wants me to do that. And I feel, so there's the ego side, then there's the wanting to help as many people as possible. So saying yes to like guest posts or, things that might take time. And then balancing that with health. So, I'm really tired because I've just done this 3-day conference, and that's very tiring for an introvert. And sort of what really is unique about what I can do, or what you can do, or what anyone can do. I can write books and I podcast. Those are the 2 things that are kind of uniquely me. There are lots of people talking about self-publishing and speaking, and so I'm starting to feel like I should speak less. So that's interesting. And then finally, and this is interesting because this is a big change, looking at investing for longer term streams of income. So when, you know, I know some people listening might be at the hundreds of dollars a month, you know, or thousands of dollars, or, you know, single thousands. But when you get enough money, and you remember when we met, I wasn't making much money at all as an author. So to now be at this point of funneling extra cash flow into investments, and of course I'm not a financial advisor, I can't advise anyone on that, but you know, looking at, okay, so I can start looking at where I want to be in 10 years or 55, 65, so that I'm not dependent on me, or you know, or what if I'm in an accident and how can I, you know, help my family and all of that. So these are some of the sort of big lessons that I've gone through in the last year. What are your thoughts on these things?
Awesome, fantastic. No, I always love hearing this because I do remember very well when we met and you were just starting out and you were taking the leap, and it was scary, and it's always scary for somebody to make that transition, and you've worked really hard and you share everything that you're doing, and that's fantastic. What I'm experiencing at the moment is something, I'm taking a mini leap into a new arena, and that's been interesting. So for a long time, I've just been, you know, writing or trying to write or trying to get material together. And now I'm thinking about the launch and putting the books out there and what order they'll go out and all that kind of stuff. But I'm talking now about a nonfiction niche category. It's quite a small category, but it's an extension of the people who would already know me for self-publishing stuff. So, but it's addressed to creative entrepreneurs outside of the writing sphere, and also people who are just bringing creativity and the creative process into all sorts of different aspects of life. And I'm kind of having to re-establish myself as somebody, you know, in an arena where absolutely nobody has ever heard of me, because I've just been busily writing away and doing my other stuff. And okay, I've blogged very half-heartedly, not half-heartedly in terms of the topic, but in terms of, you know, it's a completely different thing when you're deciding, okay, now I'm going out, now I'm having a book launch, now I want to be kind of known as somebody who knows what she's talking about in this arena. And I think that's what every author ultimately has to aim, even if your business is on the fiction side and it's more an entertainment kind of thing, or, you know, whatever it is. Essentially, author means authority, and somebody's turning to you expecting something of you. And it's interesting to be back, sort of, not quite at square one, absolutely not, but, you know, at square 10 when you want to be at square 100, and having to think about what are the fundamentals. Because when I started writing about self-publishing, when I started self-publishing, I did a lot of it by intuition, but the nature of these books is that I have to describe the process, and it's not something that I've done very much, really. You've done a lot of sharing of how you do things, and why you do things, and what you don't do and what you do. I haven't done very much of that. I've just kind of got on with doing it. So I'm finding that really interesting, and it's a very long-winded way of saying that there are a few things that people need to really think very clearly about, and I wish that I had kind of known what I'm about to say now when I started there some months and years ago. One of them is the pitch, you know, what it is you're actually bringing to people, what is your value. And it took me a very long time to understand the value that was inherent in this actual series, and, you know, what I'm bringing to, because we're all coming late to the writing world. Everything we have to say has already been said, but it's how you're saying it, and that is, and who you're saying it to, and what you're going to do for them. So working that out, working out what it is you're standing for in this particular series of books, or this particular book, or in your whole writing life. That's one part of it. Publish, obviously, is the other part. Get stuff out there. And another thing that seems to me to be very key is partnership. So I'm kind of remembering now that when I started off self-publishing and investigating all of this. And even before that, when I used to teach creative writing and creativity, you know, you're always kind of making partnerships with people who look at life the way you do and who already have people who are interested in the topic that you're writing about, and making strategic partner. I hate that word because it sounds so kind of cold and calculating, but it is really. Making those kinds of partnerships makes all the difference. And choosing the right partners, I think. I see a lot of self-publishers who team up with their buddies rather than doing the uncomfortable thing of asking somebody that doesn't know them and going in and pitching their wares, which is uncomfortable, but it is part of if you want to self-publish successfully. So yeah, I've been thinking about all of that. I'm not quite sorted out, but getting there.
Yeah, it is really hard. And I think that pitching is really interesting. So I spoke at the Society of Authors in Scotland, Scots Write, this last weekend, and I did a session on marketing and another one on how to make a living. And, you know, I had this slide and it was, you know, you have to think with your creative head and your business head, and it's that Venn diagram of the thing in the middle. And a lot of people don't want to hear that, but that is more like the pitch. It's like we spend so much time in our own heads as writers and we're like, oh, well, you know, I love this. And then actually when you switch head and you think, well, what are people buying? Or even like pitching people to go on their blog or their podcast or media, you have to think about the customer and the person on the other end. And you can't just say, well, I wrote a book on creativity, I'm amazing. And they're like, yeah, right, bye-bye.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, I get pitched all the time for the podcast, and the best pitches are the ones that don't even start with who they are. It's like, I've been listening to your show and I think this topic would be really interesting to your audience because of this, and then a bit about why they're the person to do it. So thinking about the audience first before even talking about yourself. I know it's a bit different to what you're saying, but.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think in a sense, what I'm kind of realizing in this process is that you're always, when you're immersed in a book and you're marketing and you're about to market or in the middle of marketing the book, and just, you know, when the content has settled itself and okay, there's still editing going on and stuff, but you know essentially what you have said, because sometimes we have to get to the end of the book to know what it is we're saying. When you get to that point, I feel like it's almost like you're pitching all day. It's everyone you meet and every situation you meet, you need to explain. And especially if you're moving into a new arena with a new book, or you need to be explaining to other people what it is. And when you see their blank face or their non-understanding or, you know, their polite response, that is not engagement. You're looking to be able to describe what you have to offer in a way that excites them, whether you're appealing to their need, as in the case if you're actually literally pitching for a partnership, or whether you're just trying to explain the plot to somebody and they're looking at you and saying, yes, that's very nice, dear. You haven't got it quite right, because the back of your book is a pitch, your Amazon sales page is a pitch, your website's a pitch, you know, and I just feel like that's where I'm at the moment, and that it's kind of very interesting to be so conscious of the process while doing it. And I think that only happens after you've done lots of books already and you kind of step into the arena.
Yeah, when you can get out of your own head and think about the customer. And I think that's, you know, part of that is treating this as a business and actually caring about the other side of it, the sales. And I think, you know, the people who are still just the author, they haven't taken that step necessarily to wanting to run the business side of being an author entrepreneur, which leads us nicely into the topic for the Indie Author Fringe, which is coming up and very exciting. So why don't you tell us what we can look forward to at the Fringe this year?
Yes, it's almost upon us. It seems to just come around so quickly. 2 weeks' time, October 14th, Saturday, October 14th is the date. And it is, for those who may not know, there are some people who don't know that the Indie Author Fringe is a free online conference, which we run 3 times a year, fringe to the major book fairs, London Book Fair, BEA and Frankfurt. And at London, we look at making the book. So it's all about the writing, the editing and designing. At BEA, we look at selling the book. And then at this time of the year, we look at the whole business of being an indie author who earns money. So the business, the indie author business, and all the different aspects of that, from, you know, the money stuff, tax, legals, all that kind of thing, but also what it takes to actually make money in this business. I think that's what people really need to know about. And because there's so much advice coming at us all the time, that, you know, money is a great way to sort out. If you are somebody who wants to reach readers and sell books, well, that is a great metric, you know, and for some of us, it's what puts food on the table. So it's really what not every member of ALLi, and certainly not every self-publishing author or every indie author, wants to run a successful business, but an awful lot of people do. And so that's what we look at in this one. And I think one of the most interesting things about this Fringe, just talking about some of the highlights for me, is that we have 3 or 4 veterans of the publishing and tech world, and people who are over 60, heading for 70, who are still super excited about what they do. And one of them being Christine Catherine Rush, who is well known to you all for her amazing business advice. And she's just fantastic at doing all sorts of amazing writing and publishing. And her husband, Dean Wesley Smith, likewise in his own department, and they share also lots of joint projects. We have Ted Nelson too, that I was referring to a couple of months ago when we were talking about blockchain. He has, it turns out that a small world, David Penny knew his wife. And he's coming. I'm super excited because I've been watching him from a distance, and now he's going to land into the Fringe, which is just marvelous. And yeah, so that's some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about. We will be looking also, because I think this is core to a lot of people's business at the moment, is advertising for authors. And Michael Alvear, who some of you will know from Making a Killing on Kindle, is doing a survey of as many authors as he can kind of get his hands on to see what is actually happening with paid advertising for authors. And he's going to give us either his interim results or his actual outcome, depending on how big the survey turns out to be at Fringe. And yeah, just lots and lots of different 24 sessions over 24 hours. Joanna is also going to be giving her inimitable business advice, and Mark Dawson and many other people that you know and some who you don't know. And I'm going to be talking about creativity and its part in the whole running an author business, which you and I will talk a little bit later about here as well.
And we should emphasize that 24 sessions in 24 hours, but they will be on the blog at selfpublishingadvice.org, and they will also come up on the podcast feed, right, over time. So, and you can always look at the replay. So very few people are going to sit there for 24 hours and do the whole thing, but there will be giveaways in each of the hours. So best to try and do it over sort of the 24 to 48 hours. Just give us the date and the website link people need to go to.
Yes, so it's indieauthorfringe.com, and it is October 14th, and it runs really over that weekend. And we couldn't do it without our sponsors and our speakers who are so generous. Ingram Spark is our gold sponsor, and Dragon Nuance, the productivity tool,
Dictation,
is our silver sponsor. Because yeah, I think it is the single. If I had to pick a single tool that really facilitates people to do what they do here, it will be that. But lots of other sponsors, session sponsors as well, and they bring along great discounts and deals. And we have a back cover competition, which is the first for us to run that. We normally do a front cover, but we thought, hey, let's do a back cover and look at, you know, how people are describing their books. So if you'd like to enter that, it's all free to enter, and you could win a Dragon Professional software, which is worth a few £100. So
that's a good one.
Yeah. So there's lots going on, and yeah, as Joanna said, it will be there for a few days, for some time afterwards. So you can catch up. The idea of the 24 hours is not that you sit there for 24 hours, but that it is always live to somebody somewhere in the world, because we have members all over the world, and this is a global business that we're in. So yeah, I hope to see you there.
Yeah, and talking about longevity, because of course, you know, we love to have the older writers in the community. I've been working on The Healthy Writer. Now, I did a survey on the Creative Pen last month. I think I talked about it last time, but I've actually now been reading the results of the survey, and stress and burnout were the #1 issues, and some of the comments are heartbreaking. So I'm like doubly excited about this book because I think it's so important, such an important topic, and it's got a lot bigger. We thought we were going to do a sort of 40,000 word book. We're at 70 to 80 already, and we haven't finished the draft yet, the first draft. And my co-writer is a medical doctor, so he's quite sparse. I'm like, okay, we need more personality, you know. So that actually co-writing with someone who's used to more medical writing is actually quite difficult, because in my nonfiction I'm pretty relaxed and like just speaking normally. So that's going to be interesting. But that book is fascinating. And of course, one of the reasons we're writing it, the tagline is something like stop pain and have, I can't remember the tagline, but it's definitely got stop pain and have a longevity as an author. Because if you're not physically looking after yourself, then you know, things get really bad. And I wanted to mention a Netflix documentary which just came out this week, 5'2". It's about Lady Gaga, and even if you don't like her music, it's an incredible look at a creative, you know, she's a musician, but she's a performer who suffers an incredible amount of pain and manages this sort of global brand and business. And very well done documentary in terms of a story of a real person behind a brand, but also dealing with chronic pain as a creative. So really fascinating stuff.
Super interesting. I think your book is really important. I meet a lot of indies who are overworked. I mean, really badly overworked. And in certain genres, it seems to happen more than others, where they're very voracious readers who are, you know, clamoring for the next book. And I always remember years ago, we used to look at publishers cracking the whip and saying, you know, how awful that was, and, you know, blaming the publisher really. And now seeing indie authors who are, you know, sometimes proudly saying, I'm the worst boss I ever had, you know, and giving themselves a very self-punishing time, and seeing sadly people who you know, it turns out that it's not sustainable. They can't keep going at that rate, and there's either breakdown or, you know, physical, or sometimes just complete and utter wipeout, burnout, depression, etc. So really, really, really important book. And for me, the key to all of that is to get back in touch with the creative thing, because to really respond in a creative way rather than kind of pulling, you know, scraping up from the conscious mind, it means that you have to take creative rest. You have to do creative play. It doesn't work otherwise. It's those three together. Just you're more productive, and it is sustainable, and it's understanding what you need as a creative and not feeling that you have to jump for what you're. It's interesting, Lady Gaga, because her fans too are pretty voracious, and she's trained them to be that way, you know. And I see indies who are training their readers to clamor, and yeah, again, it's great for the ego and it's lovely. Oh, I have to do this for my readers, but ultimately your reader is going to be very disappointed if you have to stop completely. So looking after ourselves is so important.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I was thinking about this a lot we went to Italy and we had a week walking in Italy. So that was part, you know, walking's been a big thing for me. You've urged me to do yoga and meditation for years, and I've now almost a year I've had a yoga and meditation practice, and that's really, really helped as well. But yeah, it's so interesting, like why we do this to ourselves. And I went on my podcast and I do an introduction, you know, and I said, and it's really hard because I feel like I can't take time off the podcast because I need to be there every Monday. And then I was like, but actually I could just take a month off and just say, I'll see you in a month. And so many of my podcast listeners emailed me and said, we don't want you to, but if you need to take a month, take a month. Like, there's no, like, what's the big deal? We do it to ourselves most of the time. And that's the other thing about me looking at financial investments, because if you have money coming in from another source, you don't have to feel so stressed. So this is, I mean, people who have a day job and don't write for their living, actually, that may be more sustainable, even though when you're in that, you feel like, I wish I was doing it full time. When you're doing it full time, you have the pressure, and your writing is both your income and your passion, and income can sometimes kill that. So yeah, I think it's you to be sustainable, you have to look at both that, how am I going to get other income, plus, how am I going to look after myself?
Yeah, I think there are two things there that are very closely connected, the kind of net worth through the money and the self-worth. And, you can be making a lot of money and have a lot of money and just be easy in, easy out, or you can't even get at it because you don't have time, because you feel the pressure of the writing so much. And a lot of us are creatives because we're making good stuff out of our pain, or that is a major spur to creativity. It's not everybody's, but it certainly is for a big part of the creative community. There is a self-worth or self-esteem issue that creativity is coming in to transform and to help heal and so on. But you can actually wind up going nowhere, just going round and round, that actual healing part doesn't happen. And it's heavy stuff we're talking here, but I think it's
heavy stuff, but important. I mean, it's incredible. Like, again, at this writers conference this weekend, a lot of the questions that people talking to me was about self-doubt, about how can I be empowered when I'm full of self-doubt. And I'm like, well, I think the difference between people who do this for the long term is that you learn to live with self-doubt. You learn that self-doubt is part of the process. And there's obviously sometimes the line between mentally well and being mentally ill can be small. But that self-doubt, I think, is part of the healthy creative. Like, I think that is normal, and you just have to kind of live with it. And back on my writing, like, I know I sometimes sound very overconfident to people. Part of that, I think, is, this is authentic, but my self-doubt is mainly around my fiction. And, because I know I can do this, but the fiction. So I got my notes back from my editor for what I've now announced as Map of Shadows, the first in this new fantasy series. And the thing is, it feels broken. And she said, yeah, it's pretty broken. And I can't even look at the notes. I'm just like, the amount of energy it's going to take to sit with that first editor's, work is too big for me right now. And I'm tired from this conference. And I'm like, okay, well, you don't have to look at it. Like, I want to publish this book before Christmas or for Christmas. But if I don't, what's the big deal? It's not the end of the world. So I'm trying to be nicer to myself. And for this book particularly, I feel like maybe it's going to take a bit longer. It's a new genre, it's new stuff. So I'm just trying to be nicer. And we should all be nicer to ourselves, shouldn't we?
Oh, and so say all of us. I really do think so. I think, especially when you get to where you are, where you can trust yourself to deliver. I think, there is a time when you're establishing yourself as a writer that you've got to be careful not to be too nice to yourself, because you just find that you're not doing the work and you're talking about it and you're just never getting to it. But once you know that you can trust yourself to do the work, then the challenge actually flips over and it becomes, okay, I love this so much, but you can get, the danger is that we end up doing all the things we were talking about there a minute ago and just going too far in the opposite direction. And actually the work suffers. You cannot write well out of that place. And you need distance, and absolutely you're not going to write the first book in a new genre, in a new series, as quickly as you were writing your books before. And that's 100% to be expected, and it would be silly to try and go against that grain, really. So yeah.
And of course, we have to keep filling the creative well. That's the other thing I was feeling, is just like my creative well has been emptied by this novel. And, you know, before I do anything, I need to refill that well. So I'm going to be looking at that over the next month as well, you know, how I do that in a more sustainable manner. Okay, so let's change tack a bit before we all get a bit maudlin. I'll get out my wine now. I've got my wine here. Switch from tea to wine. So there is a bit of news. We've had some news this month. Finally, after hinting about this for like a whole year, because many of us kind of heard rumours, is Kobo has launched audiobooks, which is, you know, potentially huge. And I've been getting a lot of Facebook adverts about it. I don't know, it's because I went on there and searched probably, but you know, really interesting to see how aggressively they're advertising this audio deal, which undercuts the pricing for Audible. And it looks like they're plowing a lot of money into it. Now, if you have published non-exclusively with ACX and your books are on Findaway Voices, which you can do through Drafter Digital, or Authors Republic, and another one I can't remember, then your books will slowly be added onto Kobo. And at the moment it's all kind of in startup mode for the indie side, but my Successful Author Mindset is on Kobo Audio because I went through Author Republic, but my fiction is exclusive. So but now my focus very much is for my non-fiction, go non-exclusive and see what happens. Although of course my fiction sells better on Kobo than my non-fiction, so it's something I'm very, very interested in. So what are your feelings around audio and Kobo Audio?
Well, Kobo Audio, great. Feelings around that are unequivocally yay. Kobo does everything for indies very, very well. Findaway's great, and you know, all of that's fantastic. And as you say, it's going to take a little bit of time to seep through. From ALLi's perspective, we're doing a bit of analysis of audio because it's becoming quite complex in terms of what to recommend now. It used to be very straightforward, and now it's changed. There are a lot of new players in the market, a lot of different kinds of terms being offered. Even comparing the contracts, you're not comparing like with like, so it's taking quite a bit of work to really kind of drill down into it. We're doing it with audio, and we're also doing it with translation.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to get a sense of what is really happening across the board as much as we can before it changes, of course, and something else. But it does feel like an important time, because I think the real question that's coming up a lot, I think, is, on the one hand, you have, you know, do it yourself, put your investment in, get yourself up. It's the very same thing as you have with an ebook, except that an audiobook is so much more expensive to put together. And same with the translation. And then you have the marketing, and that's the real challenge. On the other hand, then you've got a lot of new players coming into the market with nice contracts. They seem to be author-centric. They're doing a lot of the work for you. They're not asking a huge amount of return, but they are limiting your control in terms of what you can do with marketing and promotion. So it's to understand all the ins and outs of that so we can make a recommendation. At the moment, I would say, you know, if somebody's asking for a recommendation, I'm just saying kind of, can you hold for a while until we work it out? Because we really are in a state of flux right now. And I think what's happening with audio and what's happening with translation is very similar. There are a lot of people coming into the space, but they've the same problem in terms of marketing. Like, nobody has really, it's very difficult to market audio and to see and get some sense of your return and how you're doing, even more so with translation. I mean, it's really, really difficult. Going to Frankfurt, we'll be talking to Matthias Matting, who is, of course, he's just an absolute fabulous. For those of you who don't know him, he runs self-publishing in Germany. He is the Puppetmeister, and he's really fantastic. And he has organized, actually, as an aside, he organized a fabulous self-publishing prize, which the prize giving will be at Frankfurt Book Fair. And it was only for indies who go wide, and it was curated, and it was, Yes, and had far more entries in the German market than the Amazon storyteller equivalent in the German market. So it was really a hands down success, and I'm looking forward to meeting some of those authors. But they're busily trying to market their German book into English and finding it very difficult. And we're busily trying to market our English books into Germany and finding it very difficult. And only a couple of people have cracked it. And it's really been luck, actually, if you go into what's happened. There's not really anything you can take out and bring to other indies. So, yeah, time of flux. We shall see.
Yeah, I agree. And it's yeah, I feel as well that it's kind of a time to wait. Also, Kobo right now doesn't have a way to upload your audio easily direct to them. So it's not like you can just publish to that. And I said to, you know, Mark Lefebvre that if they're going to allow indies to do that, it would be great if we can also have an advertising platform in the same way that, you know, their beta program for authors and ebooks, because that's the biggest problem with audio is it's very hard to market. And, you know, I make decent money with my non-fiction audiobooks because I advertise them on my podcast. So I already have an audio market. Whereas my fiction, you know, my fiction audio is very hard to market, and you know, it doesn't stand out. You know, my husband Jonathan only listens to audiobooks that are over 40 hours long for stories. You know, he's listening to all James Clavell's backlist right now. And if you can get a 50-hour audiobook for the same amount as a 6-hour, you're going to pick the 50-hour because it's much better value. So these are some of the issues, because many indies write shorter books. So yeah, loads of issues with audio. And it's funny because we were very bullish on it 2 years ago when we were doing these sessions, and now it's like, as you say, sort of hold back. I won't be doing Map of Shadows in audio. I will be waiting to see what happens. Yeah, and probably The Healthy Writer as well. I'm still wondering on that because it's a 50%, you know, split, co-written. So those are some things to think about. As that's one news. Oh, and another piece of news. Publishers Weekly reports on Barnes & Noble, quoted on the Digital Reader. Barnes & Noble is no longer in the tech business. While the Nook e-reader and ebooks will remain a part of the company's offerings, bricks and mortar store will be its focus. Barnes & Noble didn't have the culture or financing to compete with Amazon or Google. B&N will focus on its physical stores and will partner with technology companies to keep a presence in the digital space. So no announcement that Nook is dead, but an announcement that they don't really care about technology. And I could have told you that when I visited New York in July. I couldn't even find a blooming Nook. You know, it was crazy. So what do you think? I mean, yeah.
Oh, more of the same. I mean, I could shake them. You know, years ago, they had a huge opportunity. It's nothing to do with competing against Amazon. That's just an excuse. They had a fantastic sitting, you know, they had email lists, they had address lists, they had a huge membership and database, and they could very easily have made a go of Nook, I think, but the commitment wasn't there and the understanding wasn't there. There's quite a bit of resistance and so on. And the whole thing has been just mishandled repeatedly. And this latest non-announcement is a continuation of the same thing. And, you know, everybody is just waiting for the price to drop low enough for Kobo to buy them as well, I think.
Yeah, let's hope so with that, because that would cement their American footprint, which they don't really have a big stake in North America. So that would be pretty amazing. But everyone's been saying to Kobo they should do this for years, so we'll see. But I think you know, as we're coming to the end now, but that kind of ties into, again, that this Society of Authors conference on the Saturday night, the keynote panel was a traditionally published author, pretty big name, and an agent who's been doing things for a long time, and a publisher. And they talked about, you know, the current state of what's happening. And it was truly depressing. And I mean, a lot of people, I felt very bad for a lot of people in the room and who had their heart set on it, because basically the publisher lady, the editor who works at Publisher, talked about having Tesco, who, if you're not British, like they're a supermarket, actually in the commissioning meetings. So a supermarket having a stake in what books the publisher would publish in order that the books might go in a supermarket. And again, the news in the British publishing industry has been about how supermarket discounting is basically killing authors, because they get so little money. Even though they might be a bestseller, they might have got such tiny amount of money that it's not worth it. And some authors are now saying they won't be stocked. You know, they're like refusing to be stocked. And then, you know, the talk was that, oh, well, 20 years ago, it was so much easier and it's very hard for authors now and all this stuff. And people came up to me afterwards and said, oh, what did you think of that? And I was like, to be fair, it set me up for my keynote in a great way, because I'm coming in and my message is, this is the best time ever to be an author if you are willing to take this into your own hands and be empowered and choose yourself. So my message the next morning went down very well because of this sort of depressing side. So, you know, you're across so much of the industry. You know, are we really seeing sort of, is indie finally coming into its own, do you think, as authors are really now migrating?
I think it is among authors. I think it's, you know, you have to go, I mean, that's not to say that every author wants to self-publish, not at all. And it's not to say that, you know, a lot of authors haven't ended up there by default, really, not as a chosen thing. But then lots of authors come in that way and find that they love it. And, you know, I definitely think you have to go a long way now to meet an author who says, oh, is self-publishing, you know, that old stigmatized kind of notion. I think that is gone among writers. I don't think it's gone among the industry. And by the industry, I don't mean trade publishing, or I mean only partly trade publishing. I still think there's a long way to go with booksellers. And, you know, the way to go is really, how do we as authors marry up with the rest of the books ecosystem in a way that it's of mutual benefit to everybody. So it's very difficult for an indie bookseller not to see self-publishing authors as a threat, as a problem. And so I think there's a long way to go there still. I don't think we'll be wrapping up the Open Up to Indie Authors campaign just yet.
Just yet.
But I do think that's a big difference to when the Alliance started out and we actually, you know, put the hand out to the Society of Authors and told them what we were doing. And we're met with a very cold response at that time. Our relationship now is excellent, and our relationship with most of the trade publishing organizations around the world is excellent. And, you know, that's just great. And because we're all writers, and that's the main thing, you know, or to keep that integrity among the group, I think is really important. And yeah, it's only going to get better.
Yeah, exactly. And I felt it was a bit of a coup to speak at the Society of Authors after, when I moved back to England when we first met, 2011. I don't think they would even speak to us.
No, I remember writing and explaining, you know, I said, talking about what we were going to do and setting up ALLi, and being told in no uncertain terms, do not do that. You're naive and you are stupid. You don't know what you're doing. and I wrote back to explain, no, an indie author is somebody who does this, that, and the rest. And I would advise you to tell those people that you have been talking to go to business school.
Yeah. Well, there we go. And we will all be going to business school this month as we go to the Indie Author Fringe, which is, repeat the URL again, Orna.
It is indieauthorfringe.com. And do check out thecreativepen.com for Joanna's update and for all good things. And
yes, and we'll see you November, I guess.
November. Wow.
Yeah, I know. We're almost at the end of the year. So happy writing, happy publishing, everyone. And we'll see you again.
Over and out. Bye.
Bye.